Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in a different place. We are here in the Pitt, which used to be Pittsburgh. It's not looking the greatest, but we're here today because there's some unique kind of mutations and changes to humans in this place that don't exist anywhere else in the wasteland that we know about. So there's these guys. We're going to talk about the Wildmen as well as the Trogs. So there's basically a unique contagion here that causes problems and turns people into mindless animals, essentially. Very similar to what happens to feral ghouls. Be careful, there's mines all over the bridge. But yeah, so that's why we're here. I've realised I didn't actually have a save file where I've been to the pit on this machine, so I've had to basically start the DLC from scratch to basically get here. Oh, something's going to explode. I'm just going to run past, because yeah, it's fine. They really didn't want anybody using this bridge. Just a chain reaction of explosions behind me. I'm sure it's fine. I think there's raiders up there and things, so that's what we need to talk about. So obviously this is a location you can kind of see from the factories and the big massive chimneys and things that was well known for industry, steelworks, all that kind of thing. Kind of like where I come from in Scotland, actually was known for sort of coal mines and steelworks and whatnot as well. So big industrial location, and it's kind of been turned into that again. So there's a whole backstory to this place. I would like to cover the pit in detail in the future, but there's a whole backstory to this place where the Brotherhood came in and cleared it out, and then basically took over and started using people as slaves to collect steel for them to mill to make weapons and whatnot. So, oh,
I love it. Another slave wanted back here, huh? What's wrong? Couldn't get over the bridge? You're lucky I don't fucking paste you. Why I should... Wait, what the... Now would you look at this? Where'd you get all this shit anyway? Whatever. Mine now. Thanks, Scab. I hit the jackpot today. Now get back in there and get to work, or next time I'll just stake you out there for the Trogs.
They're what most of us hope we never become. The contamination gets to everyone to some degree. For most people, it's some form of cancer. Sometimes harmless, sometimes not. For others, the contamination drives them insane. If it doesn't kill them, it changes them. They become animals, deformed and inhuman. It's not pretty. They're everywhere and they kill on sight.
so yeah, Medea gives us quite a good rundown of what the Trogs are, what they're like. And she's gonna send us into the mill to collect ingots to blend in. So where can I get some weapons?
I can't really help you there. Ask around. Maybe check with Marco in the mill. He's been making some of our tools into weapons. You might even be able to find a gun on one of the dead bosses out in the steel yard.
So I will go and try and acquire a weapon, and I'll meet you in the steel mill.
You'll be seeing lots of those.
Yep, there we go. So up there is a Trog crawling around on the roof.
On the blast furnace. Tell you what. Why don't you do me a favor and get killed close to the door? That way, I don't have to walk so far to loot your corpse, eh? Here's the door. Get out there and grab some ingots. Don't come back without at least 10. Turn them into me and I'll see if I can slip a little something your way.
Sure thing, boss. Let's go. So yeah, basically he's like, nope, go collect me 10 ingots and he'll give me something if I don't die in the process. So obviously a few people already have not made it, but I'm gonna grab this stuff Yeah, so this is the steel yard where you are expected to go and collect a bunch of steel ingots, but the place is hoaching with Trogs and with Wildmen, so here we go.
Your brother, John. You remember me, don't you, Billy? Billy?
So yeah, this is Billy, who is a Trog savage. So I'm gonna help this guy out. So, and that's his brother, who is still human. So if you're quick enough, you can. Okay, weapon's invisible apparently. Are you okay?
Billy!
Yeah, so he's quite sad about the fact that his brother is dead, but there was nothing more that could be done for him because he had become a Trog. And that's the issue with this place. So the reason it happens is there's a lot of radiation, so if you manage to jump off the bridge on the way in into the river, it's like 1,000 rads a second, something like that. Is kind of wacky how radioactive that river is. So a lot of radiation kicking around, but there's also a contagion of some kind. It's been termed the troglodyte degeneration contagion by Dr. Sandra Kundanika, who has been studying it. So you learn all the details at the end of the DLC, where Asher used to be in the Brotherhood and he met this woman who is a scientist, and they got together and they had a baby, and the baby's immune to all of this. The baby's immune to radiation, it's immune to the troglodyte degeneration contagion, possibly FEV, although we don't know. We don't know if anybody here really knows about FEV because they don't know what super mutant is, so there's no super mutants, but we have the Trogs and the Wildmen instead. And the contagion is endemic, so 20% of the population are going to end up becoming Trogs eventually, and there's no getting around that. There's no change in that. So it's the reason that they want, obviously, to study this baby is the cure that Werner's looking for, because she can potentially prevent people from getting sick, and the people that don't turn into Trogs do tend to get cancer or get really unwell. And if you meet and talk to a lot of the people here, you can kind of see just how unwell they are. They have lesions on their skin, you know, that kind of thing. There's so many of them that are just unwell because of this, and the radiation is also a factor as well. So yeah, not a very nice place to be, and the Trogs are everywhere out here, so they are dangerous. They're fast, and they have lost all kind of higher reasoning and fine motor skills, and they have a very limited capacity for speech. They focus on food and attacking people that aren't Trogs, essentially. So anything that's not a Trog is fair game as far as the Trogs are concerned, which is lovely. So let's see if I can find some that we can get up close and personal with, which is not something that I would normally recommend, but here we go. Yeah, so you can see they kind of walk around on all fours. Their skin looks very different. You know, their ear and their faces and things have changed. You can see that they were human once, but they're obviously not anymore. And they do seem to be in constant distress, and they often say things like peace or thank you just before they die, which is interesting. So that would suggest that whatever the mutation is that's caused all these changes to them is causing them pain, is causing them distress, and they feel almost grateful to be allowed to die and not to suffer that anymore. Kind of similar to the marked men that you see in the Divide and Lonesome Road. Same thing, that, you know, they're basically being flayed alive constantly by the dust storms, which has to be horrendously painful. But the problem with this area is that because of this contagion, when children are born, they essentially become feral within weeks of birth, and this is at almost 100% rate that this happens. So for them to have new workers for the steel mill, for them to continue doing the research and things, they can't just make the slaves have children, because the children don't survive or they become feral, and they're, that's not an option. So that's why they keep taking slaves from elsewhere, like the capital wasteland, to keep working so that they can replace the ones that die, which is, lovely. And they are faster. They're pretty weak physically, so they're on par with feral ghouls in terms of their physical, their armor and things like that. So they're not really that strong, especially if you are using something like the auto axe. You can generally take them down quite quickly, but they tend to hang around in groups. I say we've got at least 3 hanging about here, and they have quite strong melee attacks, and they also have their speed. To say they're faster than humans, and they've got a lot in common with your feral ghouls in terms of their combat factors and things like that. And then as we saw, people can change into them, and that happened to Billy and his brother John, who's obviously trying to reason with him and failing. So you can intervene to save his life. Doesn't really get you anything, he's still upset. But Dr. Sandra, she's been studying this phenomenon. She has collected a lot of information about it, which she can find on her terminal in the Haven when you get there in the DLC, and you can talk to her about it as well, I think. So that, it forms the basis of the whole plot line in this DLC, that this is happening to the locals. It's becoming a real problem, and Asher, while he's basically using people as slaves and letting people die in this horrible way, he is trying to find a solution. Him and his wife is trying to find a solution, and they want to use their daughter, who has this immunity, and they think that she can pass that immunity on to other people. But it's taken a while because they don't want to do the research in such a way that they harm their little girl, which is, fair enough. I think in terms of, just morality, really, and that's what's so interesting about the story in this DLC, is that, you start out working for Werner, and then you can learn that he's kind of not necessarily the good guy in this whole situation, because he wants the baby too, but he wants to accelerate the research, which could potentially cause harm to the baby, in order to do that as fast as he wants to do it. So who do you side with? Do you side with the guy that wants to rescue all the slaves but doesn't really care about harming one child in the process? Or do you side with the guy who enslaved a bunch of people but is trying to help but without harming the baby? So it's a real moral quandary that makes things far more interesting, because if it's clear cut, one side is good and one side is bad, that's kind of boring. In terms of story, whereas the fact that there's this really difficult kind of who's the best person to actually side with in this, who's really got the best intentions, and do we sacrifice a bunch of people for the sake of one child, even though this child could potentially save a lot of lives? And yeah, it makes it a nice complicated story, but obviously people are living in fear of having to face the Trogs. They seem to have lost a finger, actually, so yeah, so they've only got 4 fingers, 4 toes. Skin, I'm guessing it's supposed to be like it's really thin and you can kind of see the musculature underneath. Can't speak today. But yeah, they're very, very creepy, and they're very unpleasant to look at, which is kind of the point. So understandably, all these people are living in fear of them, are living in fear of becoming one of them, because they know that there's a 1 in 5 chance that will happen to everybody eventually. And if they don't become a Trog, then they end up with horrendous disease, cancer, and passing away from that. So, the Pit is it's a very unpleasant place for a number of reasons, and you can understand why people wouldn't want to necessarily stay here, but they're obviously being forced to do that. And it's making life very uncomfortable for huge numbers of people. you do also have the Wildmen, which you can see, and they basically they act pretty much like raiders. They're people that have been driven mad by the contagion and the effect it's had on their brain. So again, they're kind of feral humans almost. They will attack anything that's not them. Oh, there we go. I've got a boost for the auto axe. That's a perk that you get for collecting the 10 ingots. Because the slavers aren't going to pay you for it, you know. That's just not how they roll. But the Wildmen, you can see some of them at the very beginning when you cross over the bridge. You can find them in a lot of places around here as well. Ow. So between them and the Trogs, it does make the steel yard quite a dangerous place. And the Trogs aren't too bad, but you know, if you come here at quite a low level, they can swarm you, and that can make things a wee bit more challenging to deal with. But I think it's very interesting because, again, it's highlighting that, you know, radiation isn't the only problem when it comes to these mutations. There are other things like viruses, like environmental factors that can also have an impact on people who are just trying to survive. And then, of course, we have this, you know, this miracle baby that's been born that is immune to all of it. But nobody can really explain how or why, but they want to see if that immunity can be passed on to other people in order to make this place livable again, because it's really not a habitable location. People are being forced to live here, and they're really struggling because of the disease, because of the radiation, because of the dangerous creatures. And most of these people, they are, you know, the slaves, they're sick, yet they're, you know, they've got pain, they've got disease, they're weakened, because they're being worked to the bone. Presumably they're not getting fed very well either, and that's the kind of thing which means that it's harder for them to deal with threats like the Trogs, like the Wildmen, because they don't have the physical capacity to defend themselves in the same way as someone that is fit and healthy might have. So it does kind of leave them to struggle against all these enemies while they're collecting this steel, and the steel ingots are quite heavy, so I mean it's not so much of an issue because you have had all your stuff taken off of you, but at least all the stuff that they can take off you. But I've got 14 there, so you know that adds up quite quickly. And I can't remember how many there is in total. I think it's maybe like 100 and something, 120. I would need to double check that. But, you know, you're dealing with all these things. I was hoping to find some of the Wildmen, but I can't remember where they hang out. They do have a camp somewhere out here. But this place is quite big, actually. It's not the easiest to navigate. I've got more Trogs here. Let's see what kind these are. So, Brute and then Trogs. So, like most of them, there are, you know, levels. Oh, that looks like a Wildman there. So there are kind of levels to get stronger versions. Here's a Wildman. So in essence, they're just raiders with a different name. But these are people that have gone mad because of this contagion, because of their exposure to it. It's affected their brain, and again, they're aggressive.
I got first dibs on the loot.
Yeah. You know, they become aggressive to other people, so they are shoved out of the society within the pit. So even, you know, you've got the downtown, which is where all the slaves live, and uptown, which is where all the raiders live, and then the haven, which is where Asher and his wife and whatnot are set up shop there. But the Wildmen are kind of pushed out into the periphery, so they are outside the gated area of the pit. They're outside here in the steel yard because they're too dangerous to be around even the raiders and the normal society, which is kind of funny. You do get good rewards for collecting the steel ingots right enough, which is nice. But you do have to watch because the Trogs, they don't just stay on the ground either. You do often find them climbing across like the train cars and the rooftops and things, so you do need to be wary because they can pop up wherever you need them to. But I think they're very, very interesting, and you know, it's kind of exploring the fact that you know, different parts of the wasteland have different issues facing them. You know, we don't see some of the same creatures in the East Coast as we do in the West Coast, because they're two very different climates, they're two very different environments. Same when you go to Far Harbour, it's different again because of the fog and because they're on an island on the sea. So what you see there differs from what you would see in Massachusetts, what you would see in Boston, what you would see in Washington DC. And again, we've travelled up here, and this is a place where there possibly was a lot of contamination already, even before the radiation came along, because of the kind of heavy industry. And if that's putting, you know, metal into the water or other potential toxins into the water, that could all be a factor in this as well. And then it's no surprise that when the nukes come along, that's what ended up happening. Oh, is that a combat shotgun? Yeah, nice. So you will find dead slaves kicking about as well with weapons and stuff, and they don't take them off you, but I think you only get your own stuff back kind of later on in the DLC, which is annoying because I really like my Tesla cannon and I would like it back. But anyway, yeah, so that's the Trogs and the Wildmen. There's not really a lot else to say about them. They don't have any massively unique abilities. They are just kind of aggressive, sort of, I say they fill the same niche as feral ghouls, I think, in this location. And, you know, Medea said, what's a super mutant? They've never seen the big green guys up here, so they have their own version of mutants because of the differences in the locations. And I think that's really, really fun to see. Certainly, I was going to cover the abominations and the aliens under this, but I don't think it really fits into that category. I think it might be worth looking at the, you know, canonized aliens and all that kind of stuff in a different sort of video set. But what I want to do next with the Science Fallout series is to take a bit of a step back. So now we've basically covered all the life that we find in the wasteland, from the plants and animals to the people, and the variants of people that have emerged since the bombs fell. So I think the next step is to take a bit of a step back and look at the wasteland ecology, look at the ecosystem, how it's changed, because there's big differences in the different places that we've visited in the games, you know, between the Mojave Wasteland, where water isn't really an issue because the majority of the water around is pure, it's not got radiation, there's a lot less contamination in the water courses. So there's fish, you know, we've got plant life under the water in Lake Mead. While you look at places like this where the water's contaminated, and there's contagions, and the Capital Wasteland where, you know, and that's the whole point of the main story of Fallout 3, is to purify the water. And how all these different factors can impact the ecosystem, and looking at like the, you know, sort of life cycles and sort of predators versus prey, and where everything kind of sits, the availability of certain foodstuffs, and, you know, how that impacts what kind of animals you're seeing and what kind of living things you're dealing with. So it's going to be kind of a bigger picture of the wasteland ecosystem. I do also, I keep forgetting to look at this. I have been sent an interesting mod for Fallout New Vegas that deals with the flora and fauna, so I will make a point of checking that out at some point, and probably making a video discussing it. Somebody reached out with that a while ago, so I haven't completely forgotten about it. It's there. I will be getting to that at some point, but certainly digging into the ecosystem and how all the species interact, and how that impacts the way the wasteland is thriving. You know, having different biomes, so particularly places like the glowing sea, is obviously going to be vastly different compared to other places because of all the contamination, the radiation, the constant rad storms, all that kind of thing. So very, very interesting, and that's certainly something that the Pitt really highlights as well. It's a fantastic DLC. If you've not played it, give it a go, because it's a really interesting story. There's really complex morals, and, you know, they have their own unique kind of enemies and their own unique environment. You know, it's all so smoky because they have got the steel mill going, and the furnaces and things are all going. Really, really interesting DLC. And the Trogs are nice and creepy and unpleasant, so they make for a good enemy to deal with in this game, especially given that, you know, you're limited with your armour and you're limited with weapons because you are a slave, so you get all your stuff taken off of you, which kind of sucks, but it means that you do have to kind of improvise and find other things to defend yourself against these creepy monstrosities. So yeah, a very, very fun one, and that finishes off mainly the human-ish mutations that could be something that you come up against in the Fallout games. So from next week, we're going to start looking at the bigger picture of the ecosystems and the different locations, and digging into how everything works with the water, with the nitrogen cycle and the animals and the life cycle and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you come back for that, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!